Let's get back to Hugh. Peter writes in and says, can you ask Hugh where he thinks you can actually make money rather than just avoid losses, and also whether he believes we're seeing a Western version of emerging communism. Well, let's deal with the communism one after we've dealt with the one about where you might make some money.
I mean, he's right. Communism stroke fascism. I mean, let's just touch on that briefly, because the government has gone to war. It is an economic war, yeah? And in a war, the government takes a larger and larger role in society, yeah? That's fine. We have to accept that, okay? What is concerning is the erosion of civil liberties. So I can't short sell financial shares in the United Kingdom just now. That's a kind of change in my liberties, yeah? Then we had a parliamentary committee last week propose that we put a ban on all you guys, that if the financial situation is dire, you get gagged. Now, my point to you is we're only 1 year into this, and suddenly already our liberties are being brought in. So I think it's a valid point. Now, making money, you're still thinking the last 30 years, yeah. For the last 30 years, the Dow Jones, at the end of 1974, so if you go back 34 years ago, the Dow had halved in the preceding 2 years. It was trading at 475 points. Last year it peaked at 14,700. It went up 30 times. That has never happened before. That is the Mississippi stock bubble. That is the South Sea bubble. Yeah. And people still are ingrained with, how do I make money? How do I make money? Forget it, guys. How do I preserve the money and the wealth that I have today? Yeah, and as we say, we're seeing the absurdity of a negative 10 basis point yield, right? There's 99% of hedge funds would love to have had a negative 10 basis point return for 2008. And I tell you, if you could promise me 6% next year, I'd take it today. I'd take it today, right? So let's wake up, let's recalibrate our thinking, and let's say, I'm still wealthy, and you know what? I want to be wealthy in a year's time and 10 years' time. I can show you the way there, but it's not by saying, I'm going to double your money in the next 12 months.
I mean, but the industry, your portion of it and most portions of the industry have always been, it's been a product sales industry, and it has been so for 50 years. And the articulation, the changing of investor assumptions is something that I would imagine is a generational thing and not something that you can just turn on a dime. People have grown up with the assumption of 10% returns each year. They're going to have to change their minds.
It is generational. It's why, remember, the thing I always bore you with is this 25 years that the Dow famously peaked in 1929, but it was 25 years before we saw a new nominal high. It peaked in 1966, but it was 25 years before we saw a new real price high. And I've said to you, Japan, it peaked 18 years ago. Yeah. And what happens is a generation suffers bereavement. Can you imagine, in Japan, house prices have fallen 80%, commercial property's fallen 80%, the stock market's fallen 80%, your pension fund's fallen 80%. You don't feel good. Yeah. And it takes 25 years to overcome that sense of devastation. So my point to you is, we entered that awful period perhaps 10 years ago. So the good news is we've got 10 years out of the way. The bad news is we're still looking at another 10, 15 years. That's my point to you.
Right, let's move on now.
Again, the wider issue, remember what I was saying, for 34 years, the Dow Jones, and therefore all markets, have had the greatest returns in economic history. And therefore the obsession has been, how does one keep up with an index? And so everyone benchmarks, and professional institutional investors, they measure risk by looking at their size of position, their portfolio, versus the size in the FTSE or wider indices. That has to change. For 10 years now, the FTSE has gone up. In fact, the FTSE's gone down for 10 years. So you have benchmarked yourself to something which has fallen. And I'm telling you, that may continue for another 10 years.
Yeah, and there's a lot of